The Chisholm strength shocked everybody. She was one of 12 names on the ballot, which included almost every conceivable Democratic candidate from Hubert Humphrey to Patsy Mink, Wilbur Mills, and Sam Yorty. But after Muskie and Lindsay dropped out, the caucus was billed far and wide as a test between McCarthy and McGovern. There was no mention in the press or anywhere else that some unknown black woman from Brooklyn might seriously challenge these famous liberal heavies on their own turf. But when the final vote came in, Shirley Chisholm had actually beaten Gene McCarthy, who finished a close third. The Shirley Chisholm challenge, was a last-minute idea and only half organized on the morning of the caucus by a handful of speedy young black politicos and women's lib types, but by 6 p.m. that evening it had developed from a noisy idea into a solid power block. What began as a symbolic kind of challenge became a serious position after the first ballot. Among this overwhelmingly white, liberal, affluent, well-educated, and over 30 audience, when almost half of them refused to vote for George McGovern because he seemed too conventional. As one long-haired kid in a ski parka told me, George McGovern does look straight-laced, but that's why he was a perfect candidate. They're eventually going to sink the McGovern campaign with the battle cry of amnesty, abortion, and acid. Is that what you want? You want a goddamned America with a bunch of amnesty, abortions, and acid? They had nothing against McGovern. They agreed with almost everything he said, but they wanted more. It's interesting to speculate about what might have happened if the same people who showed up at McCarthy's Holy Cross rally on Friday night had come out to Assumption on Sunday. There were not many youth freak vote types at the Rad Lib caucus, perhaps 1 out of 5, and probably not even that. The bulk of the crowd looked like professors and their wives from Amherst. One of the problems, according to a bushy young radical talking non-student from Boston, was that you had to pay a registration fee of $2 before you got to vote. Shit, he said, I wouldn't pay it myself, so I can't vote. He shrugged, but this caucus doesn't mean anything anyway. It's just a bunch of old liberals getting their rocks off. Manchester, New Hampshire is a broken down mill town on the Merrimack River with an aggressive chamber of commerce and America's worst newspaper. There is not much else to say for it except that Manchester is a welcome change from Washington, D.C. So make a quick couple comments. Shirley Chisholm she had discrimination in the 72 presidential election. She's most famous, I would say, because she ran for president and was such a tour de force. She was actually a powerhouse. She was actually politically significant. Shirley Anita St. Hill Chisholm was the first African-American woman in Congress in 1968, first woman in African-American to seek the nomination for president of the United States from one of the two major political parties in 1972. Her motto and the title of her autobiography, Unbought and Unbossed, illustrates her outspoken advocacy for women and minorities during her 7 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. She was born in Brooklyn, New York, November 30th, 1924. Chisholm was the oldest of 4 daughters to immigrant parents. Charles St. Hill, a factory worker from Guyana, and Ruby Seal St. Hill, a seamstress from Barbados. Wow. So she's not a typical, according with Barack Obama, he wasn't black enough because he was African black. An African went to Hawaii and met with the white woman. That's where Barack Obama came from. Whereas the black people in America have been in America for 100, 200, 400 years. So I guess Shirley Chisholm wouldn't have been black enough either, using that same argument. She was from Guyana and Barbados. Just like that one singer. That one singer is from Rihanna. She graduated from Brooklyn Girls High in 1942, Brooklyn College cum laude in 1946. She won prizes on the debate team. Although professors encouraged her to consider a political career, she replied that she faced a double handicap as both black and female. I remember once she said she got more discrimination as a female than being black. I think, or maybe as being black than I think it was, I don't know. She said one was more than the other. And I used to hold that with me far and wide because it's like, okay, so this black woman says being a woman was harder than being black. Or being black was harder than being old. I forget. I should have remembered. God. Why wasn't I making videos for myself 20 years ago? She earned a master's degree from Columbia University, early childhood education, 1951. 1960, she was a consultant to the New York City Division of Daycare, ever aware of racial and gender inequality. There's discrimination in her 72 presidential campaign. She was blocked from participating in televised primary debates, and after taking legal action, she is permitted to make just one speech. Still, students, women, and minorities followed the Chisholm Trail. She entered 12 primaries, garnered 152 of the delegates total, which was 10% of the total. I want to say she got into fourth place. Let's take a look at that. The primary results, she is going to be in, looks like, 7th place in terms of total votes. Shirley Chisholm got 430,000 votes, 703, which is 2.7% of the vote. But that's 7th place, even though she loses to Henry Jackson, Eugene McCarthy, Edmund Muskie, George Wallace, George McGovern, and Hubert Humphrey. She actually beats James Sanford and John Lindsay and Sam Yorty and Wilbur Mills and Walter Fauntleroy and Edward Kennedy and Rupert V. Hartke and Patsy M. Mink. Another interesting tidbit is that Alabama Governor George fucking Wallace, great job, Mississippi, South Carolina, fucking Florida. Look what you all keep on. Alabama, okay. What Alabama gave us George Wallace, and he's going to run on a third-party ticket in 68, and he did well in the South. Of course he did. Of fucking course he did. He's this white supremacist on a third-party ticket. Probably had the most votes when it comes to a third party. What, you want to run as a libertarian? Crazy. You'll never do it in America. You want to run as a Green Party? Never. You'll never become president. You want to run as a white supremacist, segregationist, racist pile of shit as a third party? Well, shit, you got about a quarter of the fucking vote. You got a big old chunk of the vote. Which means if he would have done it again, he could have won. But they said that this forceful campaign, and then what the fuck, Florida? Nearly every county in the Florida primary, how fucking racist is Florida? You know, that's exactly what, who's that 68 guy, comedian Dick Gregory said. Now we got a measuring stick. Now we can see what the racism is in America with George Wallace. So we should thank George Wallace. And so there's something to be said about that. But what the fuck, Florida? Every county in the Florida primary, in the Democratic Florida primary, is like, yeah, we'll go with the white supremacist. Nah, the white supremacists. The Democratic Party is supposed to be the liberals. The better the black folks almost loyally vote for the Democrats without question. So how in the hell can the Democratic Party have any kind of space for fucking George Wallace? That being said, the Democrats was the founder of the KKK. They were the fucking supremacists, fucking segregationists. It was Republicans were born with Abraham Lincoln. Republicans were born with the Civil War, with rectifying America's original sin of slavery. But George Wallace is going to get shot in Arthur Bremer, May 15th. He was struck by 5 bullets and he's going to be paralyzed from the waist down. The day after the assassination attempt, Wallace won the Michigan and Maryland primaries. But the shooting effectively ended his campaign and he pulled out in July. What the hell? So even getting almost shot up, I guess that would be good for his campaign, right? He got shot up but still lived. He's like goddamn 50 Cent. Got shot 9 times and still lived. The day after the assassination attempt, Wallace won the Michigan and Maryland primaries, but the shooting effectively ended his campaign. So let's take a look at the percentage of racists in America in 1972, and I'm sure that the numbers probably haven't changed that much. I mean, it's been, 50 years ago? But Hubert Humphrey, he got, the most votes, 26%. George S. McGovern got 25%, which is interesting. So Americans think of themselves as douchebags and not righteous progressives. Okay, I see you, Democrats. So with Hubert Humphrey, you got, 26% of the Democratic voters are douchebags, 25% are badass progressives, and then 24% or 23.5% are a bunch of right-wing, fucking racist, Confederate, fucking perverted, dirty, rotten piles of shit. George Wallace got 23.5% of the vote. So how big is the white supremacist vote according to the Democratic primary? About 24% of the country is a bunch of racists. Now let's take a look at the delegates. How did the delegate count break down? The delegates, they did it a lot differently. It was by the thousands. It was by the thousands. George McGovern's going to get 1865 delegates, actually 64.95, which, what does that mean? But he basically gets almost 2,000 delegates, and then nobody else is even close. Patsy Mink gets 1, Harold Hughes gets 1, Vance Hartke gets 1. But Henry Jackson gets 525, George Wallace gets 382, and Shirley Chisholm gets 152. So she was 4th place. In the overall scheme of things, Terry Sanford got 77.5, Hubert Humphrey got 66.7, Wilbur Mills 33.8, Edmund Muskie 24.3. And then we're supposed to believe that these delegates are like the Democratic diehards too. So these are like regular Democrats, rank and file from the counties. And so that's pretty respectable. George McGovern pretty much had it, hand over fist. But Henry Jackson and George Wallace and Shirley Chisholm, thank God for Shirley Chisholm. That kind of balances George Wallace's fucking bullshit out now, doesn't it? And who the fuck is Henry Jackson? This motherfucker almost became the fucking Democratic nominee. It's almost like Dukakis. Everybody was talking about Dukakis for a while, and then all of a sudden, nobody's talking about Dukakis. He about became the goddamn alpha of alphas. He about became the goddamn motherfucking... the emperor of the world. Who? Dukakis? Who the hell is Dukakis? He's that weird, goofy guy that wore the helmet, and he looked funny, and then they all started laughing at him, and then he cried and said he wouldn't defend his wife if there was a break-in in his house, or he was against the death penalty. So he was like, even if it's, that might sound terrible, but no, I wouldn't even want the death penalty for the person that did something terrible to one of my loved ones. Which is nice that he's, I guess, principled when it comes to the death penalty, but there's some heinous shit, and I think it's embarrassing that the state can't fucking do the shit that goddamn motherfucking Hell's Angels. Hell's Angels is blood in, blood out. Isn't it? Is it the Hell's Angels? No, it's the Aryan Brotherhood. A lot of these gangs are blood in, blood out. Blood in, blood out is you have to kill somebody in order to get in, and then once you get in, you're in for life. If you try to get out, then you'll be shot and killed. Blood in, blood out. So what am I talking about the Hell's Angels for? I don't know. Hunter S. Thompson? Fucking Shirley Chisholm. Thank God for Shirley Chisholm. Thank God for Shirley Chisholm. Manchester, New Hampshire is a broken down mill town on the Merrimack River with an aggressive chamber of commerce. America's worst newspaper. There's not much else to say for it except that Manchester is a welcome change from Washington, D.C. I checked into the Wayfarer just before dawn. Tried to get some music on my high-powered waterproof Sony, but there's nothing worth listening to, not even out of Boston or Cambridge, so I slept a few hours. Joined the McGovern caravan for a tour of the Booth Fisheries in Portsmouth. It was a wonderful experience. We stood near the time clock as the shifts changed and McGovern did his hand-grabbing thing. There was no way to avoid him, so the workers shuffled by and tried to be polite. McGovern was blocking the approach to the drinking fountain. Above, which hung a sign saying dip hands and hand solution before returning to work. The place was like a big aircraft hangar full of fish. What a strange, cold, gaseous haze hanging over everything. And a lot of hissing and humming from the fish packing machines on the assembly line. I have always liked seafood, but after 30 minutes in that place, I lost my appetite for it. The next drill was the official opening of the new McGovern headquarters in Dover.